2 years of civil war had devastated human space in ways that alien attacks never could. Entire star systems lay in ruins not from alien conquest but from human hatred. The species that had once stood united against the universe now used their greatest weapon against themselves. Commander Paul Anderson guided the TDF. Hope through the wreckage of what had once been the thriving colony of New Boston. Both human factions had fought over the planet until nothing remained but debris and corpses. The Hope was one of the last neutral vessels trying to rescue civilians from the endless war. "Sir, we have refugee signals from the surface," pilot Rachel Stone reported. Paul looked at the scanner readings and saw thousands of life signs scattered across the dead world. These were families who had hidden in bunkers and caves, while human armies destroyed everything above them. They were the lucky ones who had survived, but they had nowhere left to go. "Take us down," he ordered. The Hope landed near one of the refugee camps, and Paul led his crew out to help load survivors. The people they found were hollow-eyed and broken by years of running from their own species. Children who should have been playing were instead learning how to hide from human soldiers. Medic Christopher Lee worked to treat wounded civilians while the ship's engines warmed up for departure. Most of the injuries were from human weapons fired by human soldiers. The same technology that had protected these people from aliens was now being used to hunt them down. "Where can we take them?" Rachel asked as they lifted off with another load of refugees. Paul had no good answer. Every human world was controlled by one faction or the other, and neither side showed mercy to civilians who belonged to the wrong group. The galaxy that had once been filled with safe human colonies was now a maze of war zones and death camps. The Civil War had reached its climax, with both factions preparing for a final battle over Earth itself. General Clark's supremacist fleet approached humanity's birth world from the outer system, while Admiral Kelly's loyalist forces prepared to defend it. Both sides claimed to be fighting for the future of the human species. Fleet Admiral Turner stood with Kelly's fleet in Earth orbit and tried to comprehend what was about to happen. They were going to fight a space battle over the world where humanity had been born. Ships that had been built to protect Earth were now going to destroy each other in its skies. "Sir, the supremacist fleet is entering weapons range," his tactical officer reported. Turner looked at the display showing hundreds of human warships moving toward each other like pieces on a chessboard. Each ship carried thousands of people who had once fought side by side against alien enemies. Now they were preparing to kill each other over political differences. "All ships, this is Admiral Turner," he announced on the fleet communication channel. "Remember that we are fighting for the idea that humans should protect rather than conquer. We are fighting for the Earth that gave birth to all of us." The response came from General Clark himself, whose voice carried across space from his flagship. "You are fighting for weakness and compromise. True humans take what they want and destroy what stands in their way. Today we will show the galaxy what human strength really means." The first shots were fired at exactly noon Earth time. Human weapons that had been designed to penetrate alien armor now tore through human hulls with devastating effectiveness. Ships that had survived dozens of alien battles were destroyed in seconds by their own technology. Commander Brooks led a squadron of loyalist fighters against supremacist bombers that were heading for Earth's orbital cities. The irony was not lost on her that she was using alien fighting tactics to protect human civilians from other humans. "Break formation and engage," she ordered. The dogfight that followed looked exactly like battles against alien fighters, except that the enemy pilots spoke English and had grown up on human worlds. Brooks shot down 3 enemy ships before she realized that she might have killed people she had served with during the Alien War. Major Brown found himself leading Loyalist Marines in an assault on a supremacist battle station. The fighting was brutal and close as humans used the same boarding tactics that had worked so well against alien ships. But fighting humans was different because they knew all the same tricks and techniques. "Corridor secured," Sergeant Miller reported as they advanced through the station. Brown looked at the supremacist bodies scattered around them and felt nothing but emptiness. These people had died for an idea that made no sense to him anymore. The Civil War had consumed every principle that had once made humans great. Meanwhile, disaster struck when a massive reactor explosion occurred on Orbital Station 5. The blast was so powerful that it threatened to destabilize Earth's atmosphere and kill billions of innocent people below. Both fleets stopped shooting at each other as they realized what was at stake. Admiral Kelly was the first to respond. "All ships, emergency protocols. We need to contain that explosion before it reaches the atmosphere. General Clark's voice came over the emergency channel with surprising cooperation. Supremacist fleet acknowledges. We are moving to assist with containment efforts. The two human fleets that had been trying to destroy each other suddenly found themselves working together to save their homeworld. Ships from both sides combined their efforts to stabilize the damaged station and prevent atmospheric contamination. Commander Brooks flew her fighter into the expanding cloud of radioactive debris to guide rescue ships to survivors. She worked alongside supremacist pilots who had been trying to kill her just minutes before. The threat to Earth had reminded everyone what was really important. Major Brown led a joint team of loyalist and supremacist Marines in evacuating the damaged station. Working with his former enemies felt strange but natural at the same time. They were all humans and Earth was home to all of them regardless of their political beliefs. This way, called a supremacist sergeant as he guided civilians toward the escape. Pods Brown helped carry wounded people to safety and realized that he could not tell which faction they belonged to. In the face of real danger, the differences between loyalists and supremacists seemed meaningless. They were all just humans trying to survive. The combined human fleet managed to contain the explosion and save Earth's atmosphere, but the cost was enormous. Dozens of ships from both sides were destroyed and thousands of people died in the rescue effort. The planet was safe, but human civilization lay in ruins around it. In the aftermath of the crisis, leaders from both factions met on the surface of Earth to discuss what had happened. Admiral Kelly and General Clark sat across from each other in the same room, where human leaders had once planned the defense. Against alien invasion, we almost destroyed the world we were fighting to control, Kelly said quietly. Clark looked older than his years as he nodded in agreement. We have become everything we once fought against. The aliens never came close to destroying Earth, but we almost did it ourselves. The meeting led to the establishment of the Human Reconciliation Council with representatives from both factions and neutral groups. Their mission was to heal the wounds of civil war and rebuild human civilization on a foundation of cooperation rather than conquest. Admiral Turner was chosen to lead the new Terran peacekeeping force that would replace the divided military. The new force would focus on protection and rescue, rather than expansion and domination. Never again would humans turn their strength against each other. Dr. Jennifer Walsh opened the first Reconciliation Medical Center where former enemies could receive treatment regardless of their faction affiliation. Supremacist and loyalist wounded were treated in the same wards by the same doctors. Slowly, the healing began. The alien coalition, seeing humanity humbled by its own actions, offered conditional peace terms that were far more generous than anyone had expected. Admiral Kethvar himself came to Earth to sign the treaties that would end decades of warfare. Your species has taught us much about the nature of strength, he told the human negotiators. True strength lies not in the ability to conquer others, but in the wisdom to know when conquest becomes self-destruction. The galaxy began to heal as human expansion stopped and refugees from both sides returned to rebuild their shattered worlds. Trade resumed between human and alien territories as the threat of human aggression faded into memory. 5 years after the Civil War ended, young Benjamin Walsh graduated from the New Terran Academy and joined the peacekeeping force. His mother Jennifer had told him stories about the dark days when humans fought each other, and he was determined to ensure that such madness never returned. Remember, his training instructor told the new recruits, we are the guardians of peace, not the bringers of war. Our strength comes from our unity, not from our weapons. Benjamin understood the lesson that his species had learned at such terrible cost. No alien blade had been able to break humanity, but they had almost broken themselves. The greatest victory was not conquering others, but conquering the darkness within their own hearts. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but humanity would face them with wisdom earned through suffering. They had learned that being unbreakable meant knowing when not to fight as much as knowing how to fight. The blade that had nearly destroyed them was now sheathed forever. 3 years had passed since Operation Thunderstrike began, and the galaxy looked very different. Human flags flew over worlds that had been alien for millions of years. The Terran Defense Force controlled shipping lanes that stretched across half the known galaxy. Fear of human military might had replaced fear of human extinction. Admiral Grace Kelly stood on the bridge of the TDF Retribution, the newest and most powerful warship ever built by human hands. The massive vessel could destroy entire fleets and had never lost a battle. But as Grace looked out at the stars, she felt more worried than proud. The reports on her desk told a troubling story. Human military units were splitting into different groups with different ideas about how the war should be fought. Some still believed they were defending humanity, while others thought humans should rule over all alien species. General Ryan Clark had become the leader of the second group. His followers called themselves the Human First Movement, and they believed that aliens were naturally inferior to humans. They wanted to conquer every alien world and make their people into slaves. "Admiral Kelly, we have new orders from General Clark," her communications officer announced. Grace read the orders and felt her blood turn cold. Clark wanted her to attack a peaceful alien research station that was working on medical treatments for a plague. The station had never threatened any human world, but it was in territory that Clark wanted to control. "Ma'am, those aliens are trying to save lives," her tactical officer said quietly. Grace crumpled the orders in her fist. She had joined the Defense Force to protect human lives, not to murder alien doctors. But Clark commanded half the human fleet now, and crossing him could mean the end of her career or worse. On the diplomatic front, Ambassador Lucy Parker was trying to hold together what remained of human decency. She had been meeting secretly with moderate alien leaders who wanted to end the war through negotiation, rather than total destruction. The meetings took place on neutral worlds far from the fighting. Lucy sat across from Admiral Cathvar and other alien commanders who had once been her enemies. Now they seemed more reasonable than many of her own people. "We can offer territorial concessions," Cathvar said. "Our species will withdraw from the disputed systems if humans will agree to stop expanding into our core worlds." Lucy wanted to accept the offer, but she knew that General Clark would never agree to it. The Human First Movement saw any compromise with aliens as betrayal of the human species. They wanted total victory, and nothing less would satisfy them. "I will take your proposal back to our leadership," she said, knowing that it would be rejected. The breaking point came when General Clark ordered an attack on the Zephyrian colony world of New Harmony. Intelligence reports showed that the planet held mostly civilian refugees who had fled the fighting in other systems. There were no military targets and no strategic value to conquering it. Major Kevin Brown received the attack orders and read them 3 times before he could believe what they said. He was supposed to lead a ground assault against alien families who had already lost everything. The order specifically stated that no prisoners were to be taken. Kevin had been fighting aliens for 5 years and had killed more of them than he could count. But those had been soldiers who were trying to kill him and his people. This was something completely different, and it made him sick to think about it. Captain Sandra Lee commanded one of the transport ships that would carry the assault troops to New Harmony. She had flown missions against military targets across alien space, but this felt wrong in a way that she could not ignore. Her ship would be carrying soldiers to kill alien children. "Sir, are we really going to do this?" her pilot asked. Sandra looked at the orders again and tried to find some way to interpret them differently. But the words were clear and the mission was obvious. They were going to commit mass murder and call it military necessity. The attack on New Harmony took place on a Tuesday morning when most of the alien refugees were still sleeping. Human dropships descended from orbit and disgorged thousands of soldiers who spread across the planet like a plague. Major Brown led his troops through the alien settlements and watched his soldiers shoot everything that moved. Alien families tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The humans had surrounded the entire planet and no one was allowed to escape. "Sir, we found a school," one of his sergeants reported. Brown followed the man to a building where dozens of young aliens huddled together in terror. Their teacher, an elderly Zephyrian female, stood in front of them with her arms spread wide as if she could protect them with her body. The sergeant raised his rifle and waited for orders. Brown looked at the alien children and saw the same fear in their eyes that he had seen in human children when aliens attacked Earth. These were not soldiers or threats to humanity. They were just scared kids who wanted to live. "Sir?" the sergeant asked. Brown should have given the order to fire. That was what General Clark expected and what his military training demanded. But something in his heart rebelled against the idea of murdering children, no matter what species they belonged to. "Stand down," he ordered. The sergeant looked confused but lowered his weapon. Brown turned to his radio and reported that the building was empty. It was a lie that could cost him his career, but he could not live with the alternative. But not every human officer made the same choice. Captain Sandra Lee received reports from across the planet that told a story of systematic slaughter. Alien families were being eliminated one by one as human. Soldiers carried out their orders with mechanical efficiency. The massacre at New Harmony lasted for 6 hours and ended only when every alien on the planet was dead. Human soldiers piled the bodies in great heaps and burned them to hide the evidence. Official reports listed the operation as a successful military action against enemy combatants. But word of what really happened began to spread through the human fleet. Soldiers who had participated in the massacre told other soldiers what they had done. Officers who had ordered the killings found that their subordinates looked at them differently. The human military was beginning to split apart from within. Admiral Kelly received a coded message from Ambassador Parker that contained video footage from New Harmony. The images showed human soldiers shooting alien children and burning alien homes. It was evidence of war crimes that would shock the galaxy if it ever became public. "This is not what we signed up for," Grace said to her staff. Many of her officers agreed, but they were not sure what to do about it. The chain of command was clear, and General Clark had the authority to issue orders. Disobeying those orders would be mutiny, and mutiny was punishable by death. Colonel Murphy sat in his office on Mars and read reports that made him want to resign his commission. Half the human fleet now followed General Clark and his human-first ideology. They were attacking civilian targets and calling it strategic necessity. They were enslaving alien populations and calling it pacification. The other half of the fleet still followed the original mission of defending human space. They fought only military targets and tried to minimize civilian casualties. But they were being labeled as traitors and alien sympathizers by Clark's supporters. "We are becoming the thing we once fought against," Murphy said to his aide. General Stone found himself caught between the two factions as they pulled the military apart. Clark demanded that he endorse the human-first movement and its aggressive expansion policies. Admiral Kelly and other moderates wanted him to condemn the attacks on civilian targets. Stone remembered the early days of the war when humans had fought only to survive. They had been heroes then, defending their homes and families against alien aggression. Now they were aggressors themselves, spreading death and destruction across the galaxy in the name of human superiority. The final break came when General Clark accused Admiral Kelly of treason for refusing to attack a hospital ship full of wounded alien civilians. Clark demanded that she be arrested and executed as an example to other officers who might question his orders. Kelly responded by declaring that she would no longer follow orders from commanders who targeted innocent civilians. She took her fleet and withdrew to the outer systems where they established independent bases. The human military that had once stood united against alien threats was now divided against itself. Soldiers who had fought side by side were now pointing weapons at each other. The species that no alien blade could break was beginning to crack from internal pressure. General Clark celebrated the departure of Kelly and her traitor fleet by ordering new attacks on alien civilian targets. He wanted to show that humans who followed his leadership would be rewarded with victory and conquest. But the alien coalition was watching and learning from the human civil war. Admiral Kethvar and his allies realized that they no longer needed to defeat the human military. They just needed to wait for humans to defeat themselves. The galaxy's most feared warriors were about to discover that their greatest enemy had been with them all along. It was not alien weapons or alien armies that would bring them down. It was their own nature turned against itself. 6 months after the battle at Kepler Station, the story of human courage had spread across the galaxy. Alien species that had never heard of Earth now whispered about the warriors who refused to die. General Patrick Stone sat in his office on Mars and read reports from a dozen different worlds. Everyone told the same story. Humans were winning. The Terran Defense Force had grown from a small defense fleet into a mighty war machine. New recruits came from every human colony wanting to fight the aliens who had threatened their homes. General Stone looked at the recruitment numbers and smiled. They had enough volunteers to launch the biggest military operation in human history. "Operation Thunderstrike is ready to begin," he announced to his staff. "It's time to take the fight to them." Commander Helen Brooks stood on the bridge of the TDF Vengeance and felt the power of the massive warship around her. This was not like the old days when humans fought with whatever ships they could find. The Vengeance was built for war with armor that could stop alien weapons and guns that could crack planets. Her crew was the best the Defense Force had to offer. Lieutenant Carl Hayes had survived 15 battles against Zephyrian fleets. Engineer Nina Torres could fix anything that the aliens broke. These people had earned their places through blood and courage. "All ships report ready," Carl announced. Helen looked at the tactical display that showed 50 human warships waiting for her orders. Each one carried hundreds of Marines and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The alien worlds ahead of them had no idea what was coming. "Begin the attack," she ordered. The human fleet struck 3 Zephyrian supply bases at the same time. Years of careful planning paid off as human ships appeared out of hyperspace exactly where they needed to be. The aliens had expected another defensive battle, but this was something completely different. At Nexus Station, Admiral Kethvar watched his supply depot burn and tried to understand what had happened. Human ships had appeared from nowhere and destroyed everything before his defenders could react. The same thing was happening at bases across Zephyrian space. How did they coordinate attacks across such distances? His aide asked. Kethvar had no answer. These humans were not the desperate defenders he had fought at Kepler Station. They were something new and much more dangerous. The attacks continued for weeks. Human fleets struck at alien shipping routes and supply lines. They hit military bases and weapons factories. Everywhere they went, they left destruction behind them. The Zephyrian Empire that had seemed so powerful was beginning to crack under the pressure. But victory came with a price that few humans had expected. Back on Earth, Dr. Martin Cross stood before a crowd of protesters in New York City. The peace activist had watched the war grow from a simple defense of human colonies into something much darker. Young people were leaving their families to fight aliens they had never seen on worlds they could not find on a map. "This is not defense anymore," he shouted to the crowd. "This is conquest. We are becoming the thing we once fought against." The protesters cheered, but their voices were drowned out by military recruitment advertisements that played on every screen in the city. The government needed more soldiers, and they were not shy about asking for them. Heroes like Jake Morrison and Helen Brooks appeared in videos that made war look glorious and exciting. Families across human space were torn apart as children left to join the fighting. Parents who had fled alien attacks now watched their sons and daughters march off to attack alien worlds. The irony was lost on most people, but Dr. Cross saw it clearly. Colonel Steve Murphy had been a hero at the Battle of Titan VII, where he led a charge that saved 10,000 civilians. Now he sat in a planning room on Mars and wondered if they had gone too far. The reports on his desk told a story that made him sick. Human forces were not just destroying military targets anymore. They were hitting civilian areas and alien refugee camps. Young soldiers who had joined to defend humanity were burning alien cities and calling it justice. The line between protection and revenge had disappeared somewhere along the way. "Sir, the new attack plans are ready," his aide said. Murphy looked at the plans and saw more death and destruction. More alien civilians would die, and more human soldiers would lose their souls in the killing. He signed the orders because that was his job, but each signature felt like poison in his pen. Commander Brooks received new orders while her fleet was attacking a Zephyrian mining colony. The original plan had been to destroy the mining equipment and leave. The new orders told her to eliminate all alien presence on the planet. That meant killing everyone who lived there. "Ma'am, those are civilian targets," Carl said quietly. Helen looked at the orders again and felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had joined the Defense Force to protect human lives. Now she was being asked to take alien lives that posed no threat to anyone. But orders were orders, and the chain of command was absolute. "Begin bombardment of the surface installations," she commanded. The weapons fired and alien cities burned. Brooks watched the destruction on her screens and tried to tell herself that this was necessary. These aliens would have killed humans if given the chance. This was just war, and war was never clean, but she could not shake the feeling that something important had died. Along with those cities, the alien coalition that had once threatened Earth was now running from human fleets. Species that had lived in peace for thousands of years were building weapons and forming alliances to fight the human menace. Fear of humanity was spreading faster than human ships could travel. On the Zephyrian capital world, Admiral Kethvar met with leaders from a dozen alien species. They had come together not to conquer humans, but to survive them. The same species that had once seemed weak and primitive was now the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. "They fight without mercy and show no quarter," reported General Vexthin of the Reptilian Confederacy. My people are fleeing their homeworlds rather than face human attack. Kethavar nodded sadly. He had seen the change in human tactics over the months of fighting. They had gone from brave defenders to ruthless conquerors. The species he had respected at Kepler Station was becoming something dark and terrible. We must find a way to stop them before they destroy us all, he said. Meanwhile, human expansion continued. New colonies were founded on worlds taken from alien species. Human civilians moved into cities that had been alien homes just months before. The defense force that had been created to protect human space was now creating human space by force. General Stone looked at maps that showed human territory growing larger every day. Red zones marked areas under human control, and they covered more of the galaxy each week. It was everything he had dreamed of when the war began, but something felt wrong about the victory. Young soldiers came back from battles changed in ways that worried their officers. They spoke of aliens as monsters that deserved death. They treated civilian populations like enemies to be eliminated. The same human spirit that had made them unbreakable in defense was making them unstoppable in attack. Colonel Murphy received a report that made him call an emergency meeting with General Stone. Human forces had discovered an alien refugee camp on the edge of the war zone. The camp held mostly women and children who had fled the fighting. The local commander had asked for orders on how to handle the situation. "What did you tell him?" Stone asked. Murphy handed over the reply he had drafted. It ordered the commander to process the refugees according to standard procedures. That meant sorting them into categories and sending the useful ones to work camps while eliminating the rest. Stone read the order and realized how far they had fallen. They were writing death sentences for alien children and calling it military necessity. The humans who had once fought to protect the innocent were now planning to kill them. "Sir, this is not who we are," Murphy said quietly. Stone looked at his subordinate and saw the same doubt in his eyes that he felt in his own heart. But the war machine they had built was too big to stop now. Too many humans depended on continued victory, and too many aliens had to pay the price for human safety. "Process the order," he said finally. The human war machine rolled on across the galaxy, crushing everything in its path. They had proven that no alien blade could break them, but they had not yet learned that the sharpest blade of all was the one they would turn on themselves. The split in the human military had become a complete break. Two separate fleets now claimed to represent humanity, and both were preparing for war. But this time they would not be fighting aliens. They would be fighting each other. Fleet Admiral Alex Turner stood on the bridge of his flagship and tried to make sense of what had happened to his species. 6 months ago, humans had been united in their fight against alien oppression. Now they were ready to kill each other over how that fight should be conducted. Turner commanded what remained of the neutral fleet, ships that had not chosen sides in the growing conflict. But neutrality was becoming impossible as both factions demanded that he pick a side. General Clark's supremacists wanted total human dominance over the galaxy. Admiral Kelly's loyalists wanted to return to the original mission of defense. "Sir, we have incoming messages from both fleets," his communications officer reported. Turner read the messages and felt his heart sink. Clark was ordering him to attack Kelly's fleet as traitors to the human species. Kelly was warning him that Clark planned to eliminate all opposition to his rule. Both sides were asking him to start shooting at fellow humans. "Sir, what are your orders?" his tactical officer asked. Turner looked at the young officer and saw the same confusion that he felt in his own heart. These people had joined the fleet to fight aliens, not to kill other humans. But the choice was being forced on them whether they wanted it or not. "Maintain current position," he said finally. "Do not fire unless fired upon." But the choice was taken out of his hands when Clark's forces attacked a loyalist supply convoy in the Centauri system. Human ships opened fire on other human ships for the first time in the species' history. The human civil war had begun. Captain Eric Johnson had been decorated for his actions at the Battle of Proxima Station, where he saved 2,000 human colonists from alien attack. Now he found himself leading loyalist Marines against supremacist positions on the mining world of Asteroid 7, the enemy soldiers, wearing human uniforms and speaking English, but they were shooting at him with the same weapons he carried. Eric's mind struggled to process the reality of fighting fellow humans after years of fighting aliens together. "Captain, we have them surrounded," Lieutenant Monica Davis reported. Eric looked through his scope at the supremacist position and saw faces that could have belonged to his own soldiers. These were not alien monsters with crystal armor and energy weapons. They were humans who had families and hopes and dreams just like his own. People, surrender now and you will not be harmed. He called out through his radio. The response came in the form of rifle fire that forced his team to take cover. One of the bullets struck Sergeant Tony Miller in the shoulder and sent him spinning to the ground. Eric felt rage build in his chest as he watched his friend bleed. But the rage felt different than what he had experienced fighting aliens. When aliens hurt his people, it was easy to hate them because they were different and strange. When humans hurt his people, it was confusing and painful because they were just like him. The firefight lasted for 2 hours and ended with dead humans on both sides. Eric looked at the bodies of supremacist soldiers and felt sick. These were people who could have been his friends in different circumstances. The Civil War was turning humans into monsters in ways that alien warfare never had. Meanwhile, the alien coalition watched the human Civil War with great interest. Admiral Kethvar met with intelligence officers who brought reports from across human space. The species that had seemed unstoppable was tearing itself apart. They are fighting each other with the same intensity they once fought us, General Vexmar reported. Both sides are requesting weapons and supplies from neutral alien sources. Kethvar smiled for the first time in years. The humans had defeated every alien army sent against them, but they could not defeat their own nature. The species' greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Provide weapons to both sides, he ordered. Let them destroy each other for us. Alien arms dealers began selling advanced weapons to human factions through secret channels. Energy rifles that had once been used against humans were now being used by humans against each other. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. Dr. Jennifer Walsh worked in a refugee camp on the neutral world of Haven Station and watched humanity collapse from the inside. The camp was filled with families fleeing from both human factions as the Civil War spread across the galaxy. "Mommy, why are the soldiers fighting each other?" a young girl asked her mother. The woman had no answer that would make sense to a child. How could she explain that the people who had once protected them were now destroying each other over political differences? The heroes of yesterday had become the villains of today. Jennifer treated wounded soldiers from both sides and found that their injuries were identical. Supremacist burns looked the same as loyalist burns. Human blood was the same color no matter which faction had spilled it. But the hatred between the two groups grew stronger with every battle. "Doctor, we have incoming wounded," her assistant called. Jennifer looked up to see transport ships landing with casualties from the latest battle. Some wore supremacist uniforms and others wore loyalist colors, but they all needed medical attention. She had taken an oath to help anyone who was hurt regardless of their politics. But the soldiers themselves were not so forgiving. Supremacist wounded tried to attack loyalist patients in the medical bay. Loyalist injured refused treatment from doctors who had once helped supremacists. The Civil War had poisoned every aspect of human society. The fighting spread to civilian areas as both sides tried to control population centers. Cities that had been safe from alien attack were now battlegrounds between human armies. Children who had grown up during the alien war were now experiencing something much worse. "Captain Sandra?" Lee flew evacuation missions to get civilians away from the fighting, but there were fewer safe places to take them. Both factions claimed to be protecting human civilians, but both were willing to put them in danger to achieve military objectives. "Ma'am, the supremacists are demanding we turn over any loyalist sympathizers among the refugees," her co-pilot reported. Sandra looked back at the cargo bay full of terrified families and felt her heart break. These people had already lost their homes to the Civil War, and now they were being asked to choose sides just to survive. The human unity that had once seemed unbreakable was completely shattered. Commander Helen Brooks found herself commanding a loyalist task force hunting supremacist raiders who were attacking civilian shipping. The same tactical skills she had used against alien fleets were now being used against human opponents. "Target acquired," her weapons officer reported. "It's the TDF Devastator under Captain Collins." Helen knew Collins personally. They had served together during the siege of Europa Station and had saved each other's lives more than once. Now she was being asked to destroy his ship and kill his crew. "Ma'am, they're charging weapons," her tactical officer warned. Helen had no choice but to defend her ship and her crew. The weapons fired and the Devastator exploded in a ball of flame and debris. Hundreds of humans died in that explosion, including people she had called friends. The psychological trauma of fighting fellow humans proved worse than anything the alien war had produced. Soldiers on both sides began showing signs of severe mental breakdown as they struggled to process the reality of human versus human combat. Major Kevin Brown, who had refused to kill alien children at New Harmony, now found himself planning attacks on human positions. The moral clarity that had once guided his decisions was gone. If he could fight humans, then maybe everything he had believed about right and wrong was meaningless. "Sir, the target is a supply depot with minimal security," his intelligence officer reported. Brown looked at the plans and saw another human facility filled with human workers. Some of them might be soldiers, but others would be civilians just trying to do their jobs. The mission would require him to kill people who spoke his language and shared his culture. But military discipline demanded obedience, and the Civil War had its own momentum that carried everyone along. Orders were orders, and soldiers followed orders even when those orders made no sense. The alien coalition continued to provide weapons and intelligence to both human factions while staying officially neutral in the conflict. They were careful to give each side just enough support to keep fighting without allowing either one to achieve decisive victory. The longer they fight each other, the weaker they become, Admiral Kethvar explained to his staff. Soon they will be too exhausted to threaten anyone but themselves. The strategy was working perfectly. Human fleets that had once terrorized alien worlds were now fighting each other to the point of mutual destruction. The species that no alien blade could break was breaking itself with surgical precision. Fleet Admiral Turner watched the Civil War consume everything he had worked to build, and finally made his choice. He could not remain neutral while his species destroyed itself, but choosing a side meant accepting that some humans were enemies and others were allies. "Signal all ships," he announced. "We are joining Admiral Kelly's loyalist fleet." The decision split his own forces as some ships followed his lead, while others defected to the supremacists. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of Kepler Station and watched the alien fleet approach through the darkness of space. The Zephyrian ships looked like floating crystals that caught starlight and threw it back in sharp beams. 22 years of war had taught him that those beautiful ships carried death for every human in the galaxy. The communication screen flickered to life, and Admiral Kethvar appeared. His crystalline face showed no emotion as he spoke in perfect English. "Human Morrison, your species has fought well, but this ends today. Surrender Kepler Station and we will grant you quick deaths." Jake looked at the alien commander and smiled. "Admiral, you've been saying that for 2 decades. Still waiting for you to back up those words." The screen went dark. Jake turned to his crew. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her computer where she tracked enemy movements. Sergeant Danny Rodriguez checked his rifle for the 100th time that day. Corporal Amy Sullivan finished loading the defense cannons. These people had stood with him through battles that should have killed them all. "They're coming in with everything they have," Lisa said. "I count 300 ships, including their elite Crimson Guard. Those are the best fighters they have." Danny laughed, but it had no humor in it. "Good. I was getting bored fighting the weak ones." The first wave hit them 30 minutes later. Zephyrian plasma bolts lit up space like deadly fireworks as they struck the station's shields. Each hit made the walls shake and the lights flicker. Jake felt the deck plates vibrate under his feet, but the station held strong. "Return fire," he ordered. Human railguns spoke back with solid metal slugs that moved at incredible speeds. The aliens had energy shields that could stop most attacks, but human weapons were different. They fired physical projectiles that punched through energy barriers like they were not even there. 3 Zephyrian ships exploded in bright flashes. The battle raged for hours. Wave after wave of alien fighters crashed against Kepler Station like ocean waves hitting a rock cliff. The humans fought back with everything they had. When the big guns ran out of ammunition, they used smaller weapons. When those ran dry, they used their fists. Amy Sullivan found herself face to face with a Zephyrian soldier in Corridor 7. The alien was tall and thin with crystal armor that reflected the emergency lights. It raised a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. Amy ducked under the shot and drove her combat knife up through a gap in the alien's armor. Green blood splattered the walls. As the creature fell, Corridor 7 secure, she reported into her radio. "Danny, Rodriguez led a team of Marines against a group of Crimson Guard who had broken through the outer hull. These elite aliens moved like dancers and fought like demons. Their energy blades could cut through steel like paper, but Danny had something they did not understand. He had rage that came from watching his home planet burn 20 years ago. He emptied his rifle into the first alien and watched it fall. The second one slashed at him with its glowing sword. Danny rolled to the side and came up with a grenade in his hand. The explosion filled the corridor with smoke and screaming. "This is for Earth," he said as he finished off the survivors. On the command deck, Jake watched his people fight and die. Every human life lost was like a knife in his heart, but he could not show weakness. The crew looked to him for strength, and he would give it to them even if it killed him. "Sir, they're bringing up their siege weapons," Lisa reported. "Those plasma cannons can melt through our armor." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Zephyrians always tried to win with technology first. When that failed, they brought bigger technology. They never seemed to understand that humans did not fight with technology alone. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the station communications. "They think they can break us with bigger guns." They thought wrong. "We are not just defending a station today. We are defending the idea that humans do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not break." The siege weapons opened fire and sections of the station's outer hull began to glow red hot. Emergency teams rushed to seal breaches as the metal started to melt. The artificial gravity flickered and the air recycling system strained to keep up, but the humans did not break. Dr. Grant rerouted power from non-essential systems to keep the shields running. Engineers welded metal plates over holes while alien fire burned around them. Medical teams carried wounded fighters back to their posts as soon as they could stand. For 72 hours, the battle raged without stopping. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at Kepler Station. Their best ships, their finest warriors, their most powerful weapons. Nothing worked. Every time they thought they had won, humans appeared from somewhere to hit them again. On the third day, something changed in the alien attacks. They became less coordinated and more desperate. Jake realized that Admiral Kethvar was running out of options. The Zephyrian fleet that had seemed so mighty 3 days ago was now half destroyed. Bodies of alien soldiers drifted in space around the station. "Sir, they're pulling back," Lisa announced. Jake could hardly believe it. The alien fleet was actually retreating. Ships that had hammered the station for 3 days were now turning away and heading back into deep space. The communication screen activated again, and Admiral Kethvar appeared. This time his crystalline features showed something Jake had never seen before in a Zephyrian face. "Respect. Captain Morrison," the alien said slowly. "Your species continues to surprise us. We came here to break you but found something that cannot be broken. This battle is yours." The screen went dark and the alien fleet jumped to hyperspace. Jake looked around the command deck at his exhausted crew. They had done the impossible again. They had stood against an enemy that should have destroyed them and won through pure human stubbornness. Danny Rodriguez limped onto the bridge with his arm in a sling, but a smile on his face. Amy Sullivan followed behind him with burns on her uniform and pride in her eyes. Dr. Grant had not slept in 3 days, but she was already working on plans to repair the station. "Well," Jake said to his people, "I guess we showed them that no alien blade can break humans." He was right about that. But none of them knew that the greatest threat to humanity would not come from alien weapons. It would come from within themselves.